Hello, welcome everyone to the CNC with Dave Gatton show. I'm your host, Dave Gatton, and tonight I have my buddy Javi going to help me watch the chat. And we also have a newbie, Mr. Michael Murray, who's just finished building his Gatton CNC and got it up and running and playing around. So, Mike, tonight, if we get to talking about anything at all and you got questions you want to throw in there, feel free to do so, as well as all y'all out there in the chat. I appreciate y'all tuning in tonight. I got a couple of little shout outs I want to do. First, I wanted to ask everybody, how many folks, let's see a show of hands over there in chat, how many folks have flipped the switch from the AC to the heat? I still haven't done it here, but it's finally starting to get where it's pretty nice outside. Of course, it rained a bunch today, but still, it's nice to not have those 90-degree temperatures. Anyway, before we get started, you can see my stupid dog, Jack, bringing some toys in, wanting to play. I flipped the switch in Wisconsin. Yeah, I bet you probably did in Wisconsin for a few weeks now. Yeah, it looks like a lot of folks already have. I'm sure you haven't, Javi. You may not ever flip that switch.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to hold off as long as I can before I turn my heat on. Wanted to thank a few people. I was kind of hoping they would be out in the chat. So far, I'm not seeing them, but that don't mean anything. I think I need to refresh this page. I'll leave it alone. It don't matter. But I wanted to thank a few folks. I hope if they're not in the chat now, they'll be in there later or watch this later and see it. But I wanted to thank David Mitchell. He sent me this awesome Indiana license plate. I use these for make cigar box guitars. And I was asking the other day about Indiana plates, and he sent me this. So thank you very much, David Mitchell. Out of, I believe he's in Kentucky, I think. And another quick shout out. Again, somebody heard me talking about cigar boxes. And Rick Polecki. I know how to say his name now because he wrote me a letter. It's Rick Polecki. He sent me this nice cigar box, which will end up being a cigar box guitar. And another thing cool about Rick is he sent a really nice letter. You know, sometimes folks, when they send me something, they'll throw in a little note or something. But I'm going to show you this. Rick sent like a 3-page letter. And if you check this out, for you millennials out there, this is how you write a letter. You know, this is how you do it. All nice and neat, got the date. It kind of restored my faith in mankind to see that somebody can still write a real letter instead of all the abbreviations and acronyms and all that kind of mess. But there's David Mitchell. David, I was just thanking you. You may, if you just tuned in, you may have missed it, but I was thanking you for your license plate you sent me the other day. Thank you very much. But yeah, thank you again, Rick, for the cigar box and for the nice letter too. I learned a whole bunch of stuff about him because he told me all kinds of stuff. All right. We're going to talk about some different things. I called this show Nesting and Multiple Part Programming. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. I've got some stuff where I'll screen share and show some examples and stuff that I've done. And I've got somebody I was talking to today, and they were asking me a question about how they run something. And I said, well, you know, it's funny you mentioned that because I'm going to do an example. So I'll kind of set it up just like the way you're telling me you run stuff, and use that as one of the examples. So we're going to start off. I'm going to share a couple of G code and M code little things that may help you. You may not ever use them, but they're kind of handy to know. You know, last week we talked about G code and how you can add little things into your program as long as you know what they do and where to add them in the program, and they can make life easier for you. So anyway, let me, Javi, like I said, I'm going to be going to screen share here. I can remember how to do this.
You got the presenting up. All you're missing is the screen share.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so here we go. And I'm going to go here. I've got my Mach 3 open. And I hope this works. I don't understand why. Maybe somebody can explain it to me. But when you have this Mach 3 connected to a machine, whatever you've got your speed set at, you know, that's what it moves at. But with this not set at a machine, even though I might have my feed rate set at 200, this thing just goes really slow. So I know we're probably not going to have time to watch through. I'm going to have to jump through some of this stuff. But I want to start out with something. Let's see if I can find it here. Everybody's familiar with the Aztec calendar. If you haven't made one, you probably will someday. That's everybody's pretty familiar with that. And of course, there's different variations of that. The Star Wars thing, and I don't know, there's 3 or 4 of them, I think. But anyway, I wanted to talk about this. And there's a G code in. First of all, I guess y'all can see my screen, right? No problems there?
Yes. No problem.
Okay. No problem. In the G code over here, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see there's a G51, which is set axis data input scale factor, and a G50, which is reset all scale factors to 1. And I'm going to show you how to use these, and you might think, well, Dave, why in the heck would I do that when I could just go back to VCar Pro and scale something? And then for most cases, that's the best way to do it, is to do it in your design software, just scale it there. But let's say that somebody sends you the code for something and you don't have a DXF file, or, you know, the VCar file or a Spire file or whatever it might be. All you've got is this code. And they say, well, you know, here's the code. And of course, you know, up here in the code, it tells you what size to use. You can say this is on a 10 by 10 blank, and it uses the 60-degree V-bit. And this is just the carving for this Aztec calendar. Well, let's say you decided you wanted to take a piece of MDF and you wanted to make one 1.5 times as big as this. Well, I'm going to show you how you can do it just by using this code. Now, obviously, this program takes a long time, even for a small one, so we're not going to sit here and watch it all. But I'll move to a different example to show you some things about this. But if you wanted to do this, now, if I go over here to the toolpath, which I showed everybody last week, how you can come over here and you can see that this program limits. I know that from the farthest point out here to the farthest one over here is about 4.5 inches. So we know that this is about a 9-inch diameter calendar. And we can also see that the Z range, the deepest it goes is a little over 1/4 inch, 0.2852. Okay, and of course this is the 20 millimeters that it raises up for the safety at the end of it. So if we wanted to make this and run it 1.5 times, I'm just throwing that number out there. Here's how you would do it. You would go to edit this G code, and somewhere up here we want to put probably right after this N180 line, I'll just add in 185. You don't really have to add the line numbers, but I will. And I'm going to put G51 X 1.5. Well, let me put a capital X just to keep it looking right. Whoop. There we go. 1.5. And Y, well, 1.5. Now that 1.5 is telling it to scale the code that's down below where I'm putting this G51 1.5 times. And what you need to remember to do is come down here to the end and put I'll just add another line here, G321860, and put G50. Okay, now what that will do, and I'm going to save this, and if somebody sees the mistake I'm purposely doing, don't say anything yet because I'll get to that in a minute. But there's something I just did that's really not right, but that's all part of what I'm trying to do here to show you. So we'll put this back in here, and you'll notice right here, this will start flashing up here where my pointer is, and it'll say 1.5, and now it goes back to 1. But it kind of warns you that, hey, you're loading a program in there that's got some scaling stuff in there. So if I was to run this program, and we'll start it, I guess. Like I said, this stuff runs terribly slow. But I'll hit cycle start and just talk for a minute till it gets down to there. And as soon as it gets down where it hits that G51, there it goes, you'll see those flashing. And now all that code that's down below it is scaling 1.5 times. So it will make it bigger. Now, like I said, this is going to take forever, so I'm not going to sit here and watch all this run. But I'll stop this, and if we come over here to the toolpath, you can see that where our limits were 4.8 something, you know, or whatever it was, 4.5, or I can't remember what it said. You can see that it's bigger. Now notice it's just the X and the Y bigger. It's not the Z because I did not change. I didn't tell it to scale the Z and go deeper. I just changed that. So, but one other thing I want to show you when I get back, let's go back over here and we'll go edit. And let's see if I can come down here. Well, wait a minute. Let me do it this way. We're going to come, we'll go back here. Okay, as that thing scrolls down and it hits that G51, it'll be flashing up here. Well, now if I come down here, and I'm going to just go just a few lines up and we'll run from there. There we go. It's got to move to a new spot. But as it finishes up, you'll notice that where I put that G50, that G50 is to turn the scaling off and make it go back to a scale of 1. But is it going? Press cycle. Okay, I guess I got to press cycle start again. Okay, but now you'll notice when it gets to that line right above it, the M30. Well, again, this takes forever doing it like this without hooked to a machine. Okay, boom. Okay, you notice as soon as it hits that M30, M30 is what? It is program end and rewind. So it ended the program and rewound before it ever hit that G50. So that's why I wanted to point this out, that when you put that G50 in there to turn it off, it won't work because you notice it's still at 1.5, which is what it will be at when you go to load in another program. So that's why I'm trying to say, if you're going to do this, make sure you have it where it turns it off. So what I'd have to do if I was going to add that is I could either delete or just put the parentheses, which will make that a comment. And that way it won't read that M30.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I come down here, oh, nuts. This is the worst program to use to try to do this because it's too dang long. I'm going to try to come back just a little bit. Okay, and then we'll run from there.
Take your time, Dave. There's a lot of interested folks out there saying they didn't realize they could do that. So,
well, I figured these things I'm going to show you tonight are stuff that you probably didn't know, because unless you really dig into some of this stuff, you wouldn't think to use this. Is it working?
Yeah, I wouldn't have known this, Dave.
That's a good one, Mike.
Yeah, day one, learn scaling. Day two.
Okay, is it stopped? All right, there we go. And again, it'll take a minute or two to get back. But now, as you see the yellow flashing up here showing this scale, it'll skip over that M30 and hit the G50. As soon as it gets back to 0.
Did you have to put the M30 in there?
No, you could delete that line if you want. Now, why is it not working? It didn't.
There, it just went back.
Yeah, it went back to 1.
Okay, but it didn't rewind.
Cycle
so
back,
I guess
yeah.
that's what I was waiting on. I thought it was going to rewind, but it didn't. But yeah, so you have to make sure you put that in at the right spot, because if you're just going to run one of these and scale it and then run something else, if you're not paying attention, of course, it's kind of hard to miss because you see how it flashes at you. So when you see that you've got something scaled in there, it will flash and warn you that you're at a different scale other than 1. Now, here again, you can do the same thing both ways. You know, this way I made it bigger. I could actually come down here and make this 0.5. Oops. Come on, Dave. Here we go. And now it's going to make it half the scale. Again, you can see it flashes when it first loads the program, then it goes to 1. Then as it scrolls and goes past that, as soon as it hits that G51, it will show it. And again, you can see now I've got something much smaller over here. It's only half as big as the 4.48 or whatever that was that I had. So
now, can I ask you a question on that, Dave?
You absolutely can. That's why we hired you to come on the show.
If you reduce it, will it know? Like, because you know if it has a certain size and that's what your toolpath you designed, how deep and all, if you reduce it, is that going to like overlap and really screw something up, or will it automatically?
Well, these kind of, I'm using this Aztec to demonstrate this, but if you look, this is the same maximum depth for the half scale, the normal scale, and the 1.5 scale. So this may or may not work real well in here because of all this. I wouldn't want to use it on this. I just happen to have this program and I picked this. If let's say, for example, well, let's go back here and this will make more sense. Well, maybe it'll make more sense. If I take the profile thing, which this is nothing more than a circle to cut it out. Currently, this circle is what, 9.5 inches diameter, or no, not, yeah, isn't that 9.5? Somebody do some math real quick.
Yeah, 9.5.
Okay, so if let's say you were just going to make some round circles out of something, you know, this would be a good candidate to use the scaling. If you needed to make a bunch of different size ones, you could change the scale and cut them, and you know your Z is never going to change because your material is always the same thickness. You know, or assuming you're using the same thickness to cut all these out. But you know, in some cases, I have used this for some things because when I first got into CNC, you know, the VCarve Pro was one of the last things I bought. And since I worked at a company that programmed lasers and stuff, I would always take, you know, because anytime, you know, if you work at a sheet metal shop or a plate fab shop and have CNC equipment, the people that sell you the CNC equipment, they always have these, you know, Harley Davidson files and, you know, different kinds of files that they use for testing the machine or whatever. So I would get those, bring them home, and they'd actually have code for a laser, and I would adapt it to run on my little CNC that I was building. Well, a lot of times this stuff was really too big because the first CNC I built wasn't very big, so I had to scale it down, and it works good for that. Now, V carving is probably not the best thing to use it for. And another thing you wouldn't want to use it for is if you have, let's say you have a plate that has a 1/4 inch through hole in each corner, maybe an inch off the edge of each corner. And that, let's say a plate is 4 by 4, it's 4 inches by 4 inches. Well, if you decided you wanted to scale that up to 6 by 6, you could scale the plate up, but when you put that code in there, it's also going to scale that hole up. So now you don't have a 1/4 inch hole, you got a, you know, 3/8 or whatever, depending on how much you scaled it up. So you do have to think about that as well. But for some things, if it's just 2D parts or a 2D file that, you know, doesn't have V carving or something, it's a kind of neat way to change scale if you don't have the actual file. You know, you don't have the file, the DXF or the CRV file to bring into your thing. Yeah. Like I said, I just thought I'd show this, you know, because we were talking about some G-code stuff last week, and this one is kind of neat. You're not going to find a lot of applications for it, but well, if you
Dave, I mean, that's a fantastic tip, and not so much for, you know, going full out 1.5 times or 1/2 inch, but even if you have to do a small tweak, like you proportionately scale something where the scale won't matter that much, like 1.01, because you have to get a precision scale in, and you don't have the G code. It is quite useful.
Right, yeah, and that's what I said. I've used it before for things, and it worked really great. You know, a prime example, you know, of course, nobody is supposed to cut these, but the Harley Davidson logo, that, you know, that's probably about as popular as the Aztec calendar, but that it works great for that. You can make one 5 by 5 inches, or you can make one, you know, 2 foot by 2 foot or something with just using this simple G code, and it works really well. All right, so,
and for those of you folks that do use that other pattern that he just mentioned, be aware they're very strict on their copyrights. So,
yeah, like I said, that file's out there everywhere, but you can't cut any, and you're for sure not supposed to sell any of them. So I see them posted on Facebook, not in my groups, but in other groups all the time, and I'm like, man, you flirting with. Yeah, there, buddy, posting a picture of those things. But anyway, I just thought I would show that.
You know them CNCers, they live on the wild side, you know.
Yeah, I know. Just like I said, if you do use it, make sure that you either, And I'm a big fan of putting parentheses around stuff. That way you don't have to remember what code was in there before. If you delete it and then you go to change it back, you know, you go, well, wait a minute. Well, we don't even have to think. You just delete the parentheses and do it. But like I said, if you put one in, put it ahead of the M30 or put it behind the M30 and then put parentheses around that so that it will not read that as not execute that line. And because if you don't, it'll never hit the G50 and it'll always stay in the G51 mode, which will be for whatever code. And of course you can, well, let's see. Let me go back to that, the one where I already had it changed. I think it was this one. Yeah, I've still got it on this one. If for some reason something happens and you start this out and it gets, see, now it's hit that thing, now it's in the scale mode, and you stop and you decide you don't want to run it, you can always come over here and put G50 and that'll turn it off. So that will do it. All right. That is one little code I wanted to share with you guys. And gals. I know there's some gals out there.
What's the difference between hitting stop or going to the MDI and hitting G50?
Well, I mean, if you decide for some reason you're not going to run this program and it's stuck on that scale flashing and you need to get that turned off, you could come down to the code, into the code, and run it past it that way. But the easiest way is just go to MDI and put that G50 in there and hit enter, and that turns it off. Just, you know, I could turn it on the same way. I could come over here and put G51X 1.5. See, now that scale just on the X, the one that I changed, is flashing. But I can turn it back off just as easily like that. That's just a way that you can get it turned off. If for some reason it gets stuck on there and you don't know how to get rid of it, you can just go to the MDI, type G50, and it's done. Okay, any questions about what I've done so far?
Raymond earlier was asking, not so much about what you've done, but Raymond was asking if there was a way to change the screen colors on the display to other than blue and red.
In Mach 3, yeah, I think you can. I've just always used the default. Yeah. Is that what?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I used to fiddle around with all that stuff with desktops on the computers, and after a while, you just get tired of customizing. Yeah.
Well, for me, since you know, I do what I do, and I'm sometimes showing people, I want my screen to look exactly the same way theirs does, whether they're looking at mine or, you know, I don't like to use those other screen sets, because if they're using the default one like I am, and I'm using a custom one, and I say, well, it's over there by, you know, they're trying to help somebody, talking to them on the phone or with text message or whatever, it's hard to communicate when you all aren't on the same page. So that's one reason why I've left mine the way I have. So, okay, if nobody has any questions, I see somebody was asking about the font. Batman Forever Alternate is the font. I probably should put it up. I have it right on my desktop. I probably need to put a link to it somewhere. But I mean, it's all over the internet. You just go Batman Forever Alternate. You can get it free. And that's what the font is for my logo on the Gatton CNC. All right. I'm going to come over here to VCarve, and I'll give you another little G code, or it is actually an M code thing that you might use. And this one you probably would find a need for or a use for more so than the scaling. The scaling's just kind of neat to know. You might use that once in a while. But if you're big into the craft show, fall festival type circuit, and you're making stuff and you have a booth and you kind of using your machine almost like production, this will be something that may interest you. I've got an example right here. Now this, I was talking to a gentleman this afternoon, and he was explaining to me that he makes something that looks like this. Now what this, let me explain what I've got here. I've got my sheet size here at 48 by 48, which basically just drew me a 48 by 48 thing. And I happen to make this 1/4 inch just so the thing won't take a long program to cut through it. So I got 48 by 48, and he says what he does is he takes, this is 11 1/4 inches, and of course this is 48 this way, and he lays these 1x12s, which, you know, 1x12 is about 11 1/4 inches side by side, and then he cuts these holes out of them. And we were talking about how a good way where he could run these and really knock them out fast. So what I did, I'll come over here and I'll show you how I've got it programmed. Let's see. We'll do this. You can see as it runs, it starts here and it goes up here, then it comes over and comes down, then it goes over and goes back up, then it goes over and comes back down. Okay, now I could have just put the tool path on this first one here, and then I could have used this array copy tool path, but I didn't want to do that because when you do that, then it will start here, go up, then it comes back down here, goes up. You know, you're basically copying it in the same order. So it's going from front to back here each time. This way, I just selected each one in the order that I wanted it to cut so that it runs a little more efficient. So it goes up, over, down, over, back up, down. And then when it finishes here, to start another one, it'll come back here to your 0, 0, which I have at the lower left-hand corner. Okay. Now, I've already posted the code for this, and I'll come back to Mach 3 now, and we'll load in my M47 example. And the M code I'm talking about is an M47. And if you look here at the M code, you'll see that M47 says repeat file from first line. Now what that does, and again, you may not use this all the time, but if you really get cranking out parts in production mode, this is really handy. I've used it many, many times. So what you would do is you would come down here to your code. And again, we have to be aware of that M30 code and what it does. The M30, is program, end, and rewind. And we want to use an M47, which is repeat program from first line. Well, if we have the M30 in front of the M47, it'll never read the M47. So let's put the M47, and I'm not even going to put a line here this time. Live dangerous. Okay. So this is probably going to take a while because, like I said, this thing is really slow, but I'm going to zero all this out and make sure we're back. Yeah, so you can see it's going to go lower left-hand corner, go up, over, just like that, and then when it finishes, it'll come back down here. So we'll watch this a minute. I may have to stop it and run out there because it's just god-awful slow to watch this when it's like that. Rick Palicki is in the house. Rick, if you're just joining us, you missed at the beginning of the show. I was giving you a shout out, thanking you for the cigar box. Thanks once again. That thing is awesome. Thank you very much. And if you haven't figured it out, folks, if you want to get some brownie points with me, you can send me a license plate or a cigar box. So, all right, this is going to take forever.
Or
so
a well-typed up letter.
What's that?
Or a well-typed up letter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or yeah, an awesome letter. Yeah, you have to go back and watch the beginning after this is a recording, Rick.
Can
All
we
right,
start over? He says.
I'm gonna stop this here because really what we're wanting to see is what happens when it gets down here to the end. Yeah, that's good enough.
Patrick's asking if you can override the feed rate, the speed, to make it go faster.
Well, mine's just running. I don't. It's just something about not being connected to a machine or something. I don't know why it does this, but okay. Well, let me wait. It's got to make that move and get back over to the end there where it was. So that's still going to take a minute. It doesn't matter what. If you look right here, I see people ask me, "Well, can't you just up the feed rate?" I got the feed rate set at 200. But it, for some reason, when it's not connected to a machine, it doesn't move that fast. I don't know why. I even was playing around with it before the thing, and I set it to like 500 inches a minute. I thought, I'm going to get this thing flying. But no matter what I set the feed rate at in the Mach 3 settings, it just will not go. Okay, so now it's starting to get, okay, now it's wanting me to hit cycle start again. So we'll finish those last few lines of code. Now it's going to 0, 0, back to the start. Crickets. I hear crickets. Well, I should have made a smaller example, I guess, but it'll get there in a second. And you'll notice that it will hit the M47, which will tell it to run the program before the rerun the program from the beginning line. And actually, I'll show you something else too as soon as this thing gets done crawling its way over to the 0, 0. Okay. Come on, there it goes. Okay, so now you see, without having to hit cycle start or anything again, with that M47, it jumps back up and starts the program over. So my point was to this gentleman I was talking with today is that when you're running these, like I said, he's got 4 of these sitting here like this. And I said, if you program it like I've just done, it will sit here and run this one. And then when it moves over to this one, you can pull this one off and set another blank. Then when it finishes this one and moves over here, you pull that one off and set another blank. So you basically could almost have a monkey loading these blanks, and the machine will never shut off. It'll run all day long, running back and forth. And you talk about production. I mean, you know, you're not talking about a lot of time to stop and hit cycle start again. But why, if you're going to be running a whole bunch of these, why even do that? So now what I was going to show is if I wanted to get real tricky, is I could come down here. Let me stop this. I could come down here where this code is, and like where it finished up right here, and you see the next line is 0, 0. So it comes over here to 0, 0. Then it starts again. You could even cut that out. You could delete that. And right after this line, which is where it raises the Z up after it finishes that hole, then put that M47, and it would go ahead and start the next thing. Or you could, yeah, it would go ahead and come up, and then it would come over here, and it wouldn't waste time coming back to 0, 0. And you, like I said, as long as you got that M47 in there, it'll keep running over and over and over until you stop it. Which, like I said, I know a lot of folks use these, even though these are little hobby machines, they use them to run the fool out of craft stuff and different things. So that is just another little thing that I thought I would show.
Just as a quick thing, how is he clamping that from the top and the bottom?
Well, he said he was nailing using little like brad nails and stuff, I think, which you could still do. But I told him I would recommend figuring out, some kind of a guide or something where it was real quick, where you didn't even have to, like almost like a toggle clamp. You could set it on there, clamp it, and then when it's done, move the toggle clamp, set it off, put another one in, and go. And see, stuff like this is real handy. Now imagine, like this is a 48 by 48, but imagine if you were running something let's just take a quarter of this. You had four different things, and they all ran, a couple of minutes. Well, if it runs a couple of minutes, you got to take this one, set it out, put another one in, hit cycle start. This way, as long as you always have that machine moving away from you, you're pretty safe to reach in there, grab this one, move it out. It's cutting this one. Then when it comes over here, you move it. It's just a neat way to, keep the machine constantly running and knocking out parts.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's my two little G code, M code tips of the day here. Now let's see, what else was I going to talk about? Is there any questions out there?
I don't see any.
Let's hey Javi, you got the good radio voice. Let's do a quick shout out to all the folks that are out there.
Sure, be happy to. And let's see here. Flip over to this screen, and at the moment, the latest people that have commented are Ankle Biter Woodworks, Charles Lawrence, David Mitchell, Frankie, Patrick, and Ryan. But I did save at the beginning of the show. I'd like to thank for watching and welcome Andrew Adsit, Becca Miller, Big Bear 4x3, Charles Lawrence, Clay, Geoffria, try my hand at that one. Darren Birds, Don Milstead, Dwight Bennett, Ed Newman, of course Frankie, Grant Clark, Steve Nealon was in the house, Jeff Connor, Josh T, Keith Allen, Larry Coleman, Mike Haichu, Patrick from Patrick's Workshop, Raymond Dixon, Ronald Ledger, Gary Brady, the Wood Bucket, Tim DeLine, Todd from Todd HCNC, Jim Sinicola from Totally Woodworking Workshop, Totally Wood Workshop, Wayne Hurl, and Sean Draper visited from Wizards.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I wasn't sure what kind of crowd we'd have when I mentioned.
And Larry, Carl Nelson, and Larry Duggar, and Murray Cohen, and Ron Cleveland, last minute entries here.
Okay. And I just happened to see over in the chat, Patrick's got a good question over here. He says, in a few minutes, did you talk about, it always scrolls up about the time I'm trying to read it. You want me to talk about bit change and how to get the spindle come to the front of the table to change a bit and restart. I can do an easy example, both in Vectric, show you how to do it, and just adding it to the G code. We'll do that here in just a little bit, Patrick. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. All right. Was there any other questions besides Patrick's? I wasn't looking at the chat at all while I was.
No, there was. They were giving rapt attention to the.
Okay.
They were talking about G93 with on a CNC lathe. There was a comment about that, but short of that, that's all.
Yeah, there's different. G code is a lot of it is the same, but yet there's a lot of it that's different from different types of machines. For a CNC mill and CNC lathe, certain codes may mean one thing for a mill and something else for a lathe.
Now, if you were going to do that tiling, would you make your design and then you just copy it and paste, 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 paste? Is that how you do it, or can you just take one file and then just do it multiple times in Mach 3?
Well, are you talking about like a multiple part program?
Yeah, let's say like.
Thank you.
Oh, he froze. Like plate production, perhaps?
Yeah, like you just had those 12 circles. Let's say each one of them was a design. Well, they were all the same, but it was a design inside that hole and inside the circle. Do you have to in Vectric make that be the same thing, or?
I've got some other examples here. And let me see if this might be what you're talking about. This is a simple part that I drew. It's got like a pocket right here, and it's got just 4 through holes, and I don't even remember how big it is, 4 by 6 or something, I think. I don't remember. But anyway, I've got a blank here of 48 by 25, I think is my blank. And what I did with this one, and again, Mike, if this isn't what you're talking about, let me know. But let me delete this toolpath. I've got an array toolpath here. But this is what I did. I programmed one part just like this. So you can see I've got 3 toolpaths. I've got the drill, which is going to do the 4 holes. I've got a pocket toolpath, which is going to do that pocket in the center. And then I've got a profile toolpath. Okay, well then what I did is I came over here to this array copy toolpath, and I clicked on that, and I said, okay, I want to go, and you notice it highlights all 3 of those toolpaths up here. If as long as I have them all checked, it'll put them all right up here. And then I can say, okay, rows in the Y direction, which is up this way, and I can't remember exactly how many I had. I think it was 5. And then this way, I think it was 6, if I remember right. And then I've got a gap of, I don't remember what I had now. I think that might be it. Yeah, close enough. I could almost fit another one. But you can program one part. You don't have to put all that stuff in for each part. You just program one part, and then by doing the array, you can see how it's doing. It's finishing each part before it moves on to the next part. And I can tell you from experience, I'm sure there's going to be somebody that disagrees with me, because another way you could do it would be to now let me speed this up and let it finish. Okay, another way you could do this would be to draw this part and then come over here and use this plate production to make an array of these parts. And then you could actually highlight all these holes and put them all in one drill tool path, all the pockets. And the way it would work is it would start in this corner or wherever you tell it to start, and it would do these 4 holes. Then it would come up here and do these 4 and these 4, and it would try to do all the holes first.
Yeah.
And the problem I don't like about that, like I said, there may be folks that run it that way, and that's fine if they like it. But I like doing it the other way, like I just did.
Yeah.
Where it's running that part, then, because if a clamp comes loose or something happens and your material shifts, if you've done it the other way, now everything's off.
Yeah.
If it shifts, but it's already completed all but this last row, all these parts are good because they were done before the something, clamp came loose or whatever the problem might be. So that's why I like to run it like this. If I'm running the same kind of parts like this.
Yeah,
And that's all using the same bit too, right?
Yes, it's all using the same bit. You could do the same kind of thing with, let's say I was using a 1/2 inch bit instead of a 1/4 inch bit to do that pocket. I could just do the array toolpath 1, and it would have the drill, and I could even do the profile, and then I could do another array toolpath 2, and maybe it would do the pocket, and it would be a 1/2 inch, but I would probably run it first because I always like to run my profile last.
Yep.
So I don't have to worry about anything coming loose with the tabs or whatever.
There are reasons for using the one on the left, the plate production or the array, but you keep in mind that's duplicating patterns, not tool paths. Whereas it's a huge advantage to duplicate the tool paths on the right side, where you're actually doing a whole tool path. And you have to choose, let's say you have multiple bits. For instance, you have 3 bits on one tool path. You have to choose whether you want to be swapping that many bits, do it on the right, which I got to tell you, I prefer the swapping of the bits than, like Dave said, having it all misaligned, or use the duplicating on the left. The duplicating of the paths. One is paths, one is tool paths.
Yeah. Like I said, if you're just making and like I said, the title of this live stream was called Nesting and Multiple Part Programming. This is what I consider. Some people would call this a nest. I don't call this a nest. I call it a multiple part program because it's multiples of the same part. You just get in this case 30 parts of the exact same part. Nesting to me is, and I've got an example set up of that coming up here in a minute, is when you bring in completely different parts and you nest them all together to get the best yield in a sheet or a piece of material. But this right here makes it really easy because you only have to put the tool path on one part, and that little button right there is super powerful. It really is.
Extremely.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, it's so funny, Dave, on one of your prior shows, you showed me that one. I mean, a couple of years ago, and up until then, I completely didn't know that button existed, and I was duplicating with the array on the left. I chose all my pieces, and it was a pain because a lot of times I had something similar to this where it had a lot of little holes, and I had to go around and choose every single little hole. I would group them, but still I'd have to, if I'm making multiple pieces, it gets to be quite annoying.
I've done the same thing where I bring in parts and I'd either do the array or I'd do highlight the part and copy and paste and move them around and stuff like that. And then, as Vectric got better and they started putting better features in here, they've just made it so easy. That's why it kind of gets me when somebody says, "Oh man, Vectric's VCarve Pro is $700." I mean, it's worth twice that at least.
Yeah.
With all the stuff it does, it makes stuff so easy.
Well, don't let Vectric hear you say that.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about doing a multiple part program using that little fancy button there?
I see a couple questions on jigs, setting up jigs, and I think that's a whole show in and of itself. What do you think, Dave? The setting up jigs and obviously the 3D, setting up a point to flip a piece around, a couple of points.
Yeah, I mean, what time is it? We're already at 9 o'clock here, and I still got the nesting one to show. Yep. We'll try to do it. I mean, it's probably a whole show by itself to talk about different kinds of fixtures. Trust me, in my experience, when it comes to fixtures, I use the KISS theory. Keep keep it
Yep.
simple, stupid. You don't have to make a fancy jig or fixture. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it gets the job done. But
Yep.
I like to make something. I'm a big fan of using MDF and cutting pockets that fit the part, like if I'm going to engrave something or whatever, because you just push it down into that pocket. You clamp the bigger piece of MDF down, and you push the piece into the pocket, and it can't move because the router's pushing down on it. It can't pop out of the pocket, and it's quick and easy. When the router raises up and moves off, you can pop it out of the pocket, put another one in. That's not the right application for everything, but that's probably one of my favorite kind of fixtures. It's just using a pocket in MDF. Okay, let me go back over here. I guess yeah, we'll do another show about fixtures and jigs and stuff like that. Let's see, what was the other one I had here? Okay,
Yeah, and as Frankie mentioned, we did cover hold down methods, and go refer to that show. It's that was very recent. We did quite a number on them.
Yeah, that wasn't all that long ago. So we talked about the different hold downs and stuff. All right, now this is a sample thing I made for a sample nest. Some of you may or may not have already used the nesting thing, and a lot of you may recognize some of those parts.
Those parts look awful
shapes.
familiar.
Yeah, well, I kind of grab what I have laying around. But anyway, this is a few parts, and I've got, let's see, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different parts. And I've got a piece of material here that I want to try to fit all of those in. And this is where the nesting feature works really well. Now, what I'll do is, let me get these up here. I probably should have put them. When you bring in parts, one thing I do want to mention is when you bring these parts in, if you're importing a DXF, some DXF files come in. In fact, let me just bring in another one and I'll show you. If I import vector, I don't remember what one that was. I think it was this one. Yeah, okay, here it is. Notice when I click on this, it's not closed. So before you do this nesting thing, you want to make sure that you've got, highlight this and then hit join. And of course, this one already is. But make sure that there's no open vectors or anything. Everything is a closed vector. All right, so if I want to take these 7 parts and I want to put them in this nest, but I also know that this part right here, which let me box it so that I catch the little hole too, that I need 2 of those. So I can highlight that part right there, and I can come over here and say, I want 2 of that one. And you notice it puts a little 2 right there. Okay. Now, and it disappears when you click off of it. But if I click on it or highlight it, yeah, it'll say that there's 2 of them. So I want 2 of that one. And I also know that with this one, I need 3 of those. So I'll hit 3. Okay, and now I can highlight these, and I'm going to hold my shift key down since I got to take 2 swipes at it here. So I'm going to get everything highlighted. And I think this is probably still set up from when I was doing it earlier. But it says there's some different options here. You can rotate parts to find the best fit. Well, you can set this from like 1 degree to 180, really. It doesn't matter. And you can also mirror the parts if that helps find a better fit. And you can allow parts inside other parts. So if you're cutting a big, say a ring, and there's a big open spot in the ring, another smaller part might fit inside there. So if you have that checked, it will put parts inside that. And it really helps you to use to get a good yield of material. So I'm going to click preview, and I got set along the X, and I'm going to hit preview, and you can see that it put everything that it thought it could put in here. Now this is based on what I'm telling it, the tool diameter, the clearance, and the border gap. But it's saying it couldn't fit all this in here. Now if I cancel this and I come back over here and say, well, let me try to tighten this border gap to 1/4 and see if that works. And now you can see just by that one little change, it fit all those parts. And notice that it put 2 of these because I told it I needed 2, and it put 3 of these because I needed 3. Now, I could also change it up a little bit. I could tell it to, nah, that's not what I wanted. This one. I could say, well, okay, let's try doing it 90 degrees and see if that works any better. I can preview that, and it didn't really change a whole much. Now, another thing, I could tell it to mirror the parts if that would make it a good fit. Okay, now there's one problem that I would have if it didn't actually mirror the part, it kept them the same. But anytime you have like around here, you people that have got a Gatton CNC, you know that this is a pocket. That's a pocket. Well, since it's not a through hole going on both sides, mirror would not work because these are actually a left hand and a right hand part. So mirror wouldn't work. So I wouldn't, even though it didn't actually mirror them, I wouldn't want that checked when I'm doing this. And I would probably want this to go 180 because when I run these parts, now the blank I run has a lot more parts and it's bigger than this. It's 48 by 32. But even though I'm cutting plywood, there is still a grain direction, or at least an appearance of a direction to the veneer that's on the plywood. So the 48 runs this way, and then I cut the blanks to 32, but the grain on the veneer is running this way. So I always want these longer parts. They just like you would cut, like if you were cutting regular wood, you always want the grain to run long ways, because if you're running it in regular wood and you cut it the other way, you break that part real easy doing it cross grain. So you always want it going with the grain. But for me, it's just an appearance thing. This looks better if the grain on these bigger parts is going vertically like this. So that's one thing you have to think about when using nesting. I don't use it a lot. When I got ready to create the nest for the Gatton CNC parts, there's 21 different parts. So I used the nesting to get all the parts in there, and then I went back and moved things around, flipped, turned, did things manually until I got it just the way I wanted with the grain direction running the correct way and all that. So, but that is that's another pretty handy little feature if you're trying to run, you know, say you get plans and from somebody and they've got 5 or 6 different parts, but they're all out of the same material. You know, like I said, the only thing you have to be careful of with wood is to make sure you do the grain direction the way you want it. You wouldn't want to make one of these running this way and then this one turn running this way. That would just look goofy.
Yep, that's a very good point. It's not so much not so crucial as, aside from the look in plywood, because you have the alternating layers. But if you're working with a solid piece of wood, that's paramount.
Yeah, well, you know, like I said, in plywood, technically it really doesn't matter because, like you said, there's not really a true grain. You've got different layers turned 90 degrees to one another, but just the appearance because of that veneer, you know, you want it to look, you know, look decent and not have one part going one way and something going in the next. So that, unless there's any question on nesting, like I said, I'm not going to get real super deep into this stuff because I'm just trying to show you for some folks that maybe didn't even know that button was there. it is kind of handy to use.
Yep. Troy says that answered his question. And Georgia Bubba took off, but he said, thank you very much for all the valuable information tonight. A lot of stuff he didn't know.
Okay. Well, you know, some of this stuff, I mean, how many shows have I done? When I did the first CNC with Dave show, I did 61 of those shows. I think we're on like 34 or 35 since I started back doing them. So I've done nearly 100 shows. And some of this, just like that M47, I don't think about it, you know. I mean, it's something I did a long time ago, and since I don't use it that much now, I didn't even think about it. But when I sit around and stop and think, there's stuff that, you know, is kind of handy to know if somebody shows it to you. You know, it's
Yeah,
a lot of stuff I just figured out myself. And getting back to the nesting, you know, of course, when I was back in the sheet metal business, when I worked for sheet metal fabrication shops, we always program big CNC lasers that use like 5 foot by 10 foot sheets of material and stuff. Well, in the thinner gauge material, believe it or not, steel does have a grain to it, but it's not like wood. It's not like you couldn't take a part here and a part there. So a nesting software to use to get the best yield out of steel really makes a big deal, because, you know, steel is expensive.
David Mitchell, I believe, was asked. Did you? Okay. David Mitchell was asking about the border gap between the parts. For instance, the weight. Is the border gap the distance between the parts?
All right. Let me go back here and look at that real quick.
I'm not sure if it was a question or a statement.
Well,
but
what you have to do, what this is, see, this first thing it's asking you is the tool diameter. Okay, it's 1/4 inch, because I use a 1/4 inch end mill on all this stuff right here. The clearance, and if you can, you guys may not be able to see this, but up here in the corner, it's saying that the clearance is the distance, like right there in the center, that little round thing, that's D for the diameter of the tool. And then the clearance is to the next part. And then the border gap is, I guess, at least 1/4 inch outside. So, you know, just like I said, when I set this to 375, which is the border gap. Oh, wait a minute. I got to highlight all these, don't I? That was just enough that it said, no, we can't fit everything. Now we got to use another sheet. But what's really handy is, and I guess I didn't show this part, is, well, I'll tell you what, let's do, since if we got a minute here, let me go back, and I'm going to act like I want to run a lot more of these parts. All right, so I'm going to highlight. I got to get all of it. All right, let's say I want to do, let's say I want to make 8 of those parts. Okay, so now when I come here and I highlight all this and I say, okay, preview, notice how it lays this out into different sheets. So this is also a good way to tell how much material you're going to need. If you're doing a quote for somebody, you can bring all this in and figure out how many parts you need. And it'll say, okay, you're going to need this many blanks. So it can actually help you with your quoting on doing a material. So you can see right now I've got the active sheet 1, which is this one. And if I change that to 2, now it jumped around, but it's this one here, and then of course 3. So that's how you set them to put the tool pass on them right there. I don't know if that cleared anything up for. Yeah, the gap is from one part to the next. And it just depends on how you want to do things. I have actually, You know what? Let's see if I can find it here. I might be able to. Didn't know that was going to come up, or I would have. There's a 24 by 24. Let's see what this one is. This one may not be the one I was thinking of. No, this isn't it. I've got a, this is the spacer blocks that I cut. And I've got one, a multiple part program set up, but it's actually where the distance between here and here is a 1/4 inch. But I have healthy tabs on all of these, but it really helps it because HDPE is expensive when you use as much of it as I do. And I want to try to get, this is 3/4 thick. I want to get the absolute best yield I can. But somewhere in here, this isn't it, but I have these where they're a 1/4 inch apart here and a 1/4 inch apart here. So actually when it cuts the first one, it comes and cuts the next one, it's cutting air because that part's already been cut. But it really helps get the maximum yield out of that material. And like I said, the tabs have to be healthy because when you remove all that material in between them, that's all that's holding them together is those tabs. So
that's exactly the way I do it. I create I create them butt up against each other, and the only thing in between would be those tabs.
Yeah, and it works great. You just got to make sure your tabs are healthy enough to hold everything together. But all right, so we've covered a little bit of nesting. We've done a little bit of multiple part programming. Y'all know how to put an M47 in your code and make it where your machine will run all day without stopping. And of course, the scaling that you may or may not use that's not something you use all the time. But you may come across an occasion later on where you get just code from somebody and you don't get the file and you go, oh yeah, I remember Dave said something about scaling, and you can go back and figure it out. But it's
I was just talking to a couple of my friends again, and this point could not be reiterated enough times. When you save your file, there's a difference between saving your vectric file and saving your G code. I've made the mistake more than once where I've saved the G code, closed the program completely, and then gone back and go, oh my God, I can't do any changes because I don't have the original file.
Yeah, it's funny because my good friend Jim, my electrician buddy Jim, God love him, he has the hardest time grasping what you just talked about. He'll go to the VCAR file and he'll change stuff and he'll post it and he'll save save the program text file, and then he'll close out the VCAR Pro, just hit the X or whatever, and then he'll come back and he'll go, damn it, all them changes I made didn't take. They're gone. Yeah. And I'm like, no, you got to save. This is one thing. That's something else, but you got to save it too. Yep. So yeah, some people have a hard time grasping that there's a VCAR file or a Spire file, whatever it is you're using, and then there's the program file, something totally different. You got to save them both.
If anybody's ever worked with Adobe files and things like that, say something like Photoshop, and you're working with a Photoshop files, it's comparable to working, or analogous to working with a Photoshop file where you have multiple layers and you want to be changing that file, and then you save the JPEG, which is one flat file. You can do nothing with that JPEG if you're working with multiple layers. You want to go back to that original Photoshop file. So that's kind of similar, but not exactly the difference between an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I guess Yeah, we're about 20 after 9. I guess we can wrap this one up. If anybody else has any questions at all about any of the stuff we may have talked about tonight? I do want to say next week I'll try to figure out when we can work a good, because if I'm going to do a show about jigs and fixtures, I need to get some examples, because that's not something that's just easy to talk about. You almost need a show and tell type thing.
Yeah.
For that to show it.
Yeah, I guess one of the most common would be I would guess the two most common types of jigs are the one you use every now and then, which is you create a pocket that's perfectly sized for a particular piece that you're doing multiple things on, and then the other one is just a plain rectangular jig, something to be held with either cam clamps or blocks,
or it may just be something that's L-shaped that you clamp down to.
Yeah.
But and then use one of them push clamps or something to hold it. You got to remember. I think sometimes when we talk about clamping, some people may get a little carried away with just how much it takes to clamp. So it really doesn't take that much.
Yeah.
As far as force, I would rather use several clamps and just snug them down than to use a couple, because the more you crank down on one, it may raise up somewhere else.
Yep.
So, if you're trying to keep something flat.
But absolutely. And if you don't mind the time, because I mean, hey, you are having a sandwich while the CNC is working, take nibbles. Don't hog out. In the beginning, I used to clamp stuff down so hard, and I used to hog out 3/4 of an inch at a time, and there's no need for that brutality. I mean, I changed my tune when I started looking at all these Shapokos and these little tiny machines, these tiny what sometimes I call toy machines, and they're working with a 16th inch bit and creating this incredible. I'm going, how could it do that? It's just because they take a nibble at a time. Sometimes that actually works better.
Yeah, I've always said I'm a big fan of lighter cuts and going faster instead of, because the deeper you go, in most cases, the more you got to slow it down, and when you do the math, it's a wash. And if you're doing light cuts and faster, and especially if you've run it a few times and you're like, well, it runs great, that you don't have to watch it. And I don't like watching mine. I mean, I got other stuff to do. So I'm a big fan of the light cuts. And when I say light, I don't mean 15 thou or something. I'm something where it's not, it will run it all the time and not chatter and not break the bit or whatever.
Yeah, Tim mentioned showing different clamps. We did that a few weeks ago. Tim, you might want to look up the. Let me see if I can pull that show up. That's
Yeah, Ryan Ballard said it perfectly. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's how I mill material, one little nibble at a time. All right, well, if we don't have any other questions or anything, I don't see any. We'll go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you all once again. We've had a good crowd out there tonight. I wasn't able to see you most of the time because I'm not watching the chat, doing all that screen sharing, but hopefully the little things I showed tonight will make a light bulb come on and you learn how to do some of that stuff. Especially the M47. That if you're into running stuff, where you're making a lot of stuff for craft shows and all that, you can't beat using that, because you'd be surprised how much those 10 or 15 seconds that you have to stop and do something and hit the cycle start button again, if you eliminate that completely and that thing's just running and making parts all the time, it will add up. So Anyhow, we're going to get out of here. Thank y'all for watching. Thanks again, Rick Pilecki, for the cigar box and the nice letter. And thank you again, David Mitchell, for the awesome Indiana license plate. I appreciate all those. And you'll be seeing those, well, the box and the license plate. Eventually, you'll be seeing those in Cigar Box Guitars. When I get them made, I'll line them up back here or something so y'all can see them.
I'm looking forward to that. I just put a link up for Tim and others for Dave's show about clamping methods.
Oh, okay. Good. Good. Yeah, that wasn't all that long ago. I think we talked about that 3 or 4 shows ago, or maybe less. I don't know.
And what kind of challenges do you have coming up, Dave?
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. I knew I was forgetting something. I got my notes right here, and then I got sidetracked. I do want to mention I'm not going to do a show next Saturday. I know. No, I'm not going to do a show. And the reason is next Saturday, next Friday and Saturday is the Klingspor Extravaganza. As of right now, I'm not planning on going, but I want to leave that date open in case I get a wild hair at the last minute. And because it's not that far, it's only about 4 hours or so for me. But like I said, I'm not planning on going right now, but I don't want to schedule a show and then have to back out at the last minute. So I'm going to go ahead and say definitively there's no show next Saturday. The next one will be whenever, November 3rd. Yeah, November 3rd. And I'll find something boring to talk about. Like, you know, G-code stuff or whatever. I don't know. We'll figure out something. Or if you got, like I keep telling y'all, if you got suggestions, I don't get a whole lot of comments on these live streams, but you know, you don't have to comment and tell me a good show. I'd rather you comment and say, hey, I'd like for you to show me how to do this or that.
Well,
you know.
Well, Patrick asked a good question before about the having the router come to the front so you could change the next bit.
That's right.
So maybe we could go over that, because that's kind of something that I was looking forward to, because that last cut that I just did, I used 4 different bits. Well,
okay.
3
I mean,
different
I can
bits.
show somebody really quick. I'll go ahead and show you real quick tonight how you can do it easy, and then I'll show you another way how you can do it in Vectric to make it do that. Let me screen share once again real quick, and then we'll get out of here. I know y'all get tired of listening to me. Let's see. Let's go here. Okay. This is this. Well, let me find something different. What was one of them other ones I had? All right, let's do this one. This is that 30-piece multiple. It's starting in the lower left-hand corner. And, you know, as we saw it run, I'm not going to hit and try to watch this run because it's too slow, but it goes like this, then up, like this, up, all like that. So let's see, here, 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 here. So it finishes over here. Yeah, you can see the line, or maybe you can. Let's see if I can get it bigger. Yeah, but the line, when it finishes, it raises the Z up and it comes back here. Well, let's say you want to, you know, every time it does that, you have to jog the machine out here somewhere to get it out of the way so that you can unclamp this one, pull it off, and, you know, put another one on. Well, then when you hit, if you've got it out here, when you hit 0, cycle start, it's going to come back over here to the 0 first. Okay. Well, what you could do is real simple. Here's the code right here. It's telling it to, when it finishes right here, it's raising the Z up out here. And now it's coming back. It's telling it to go to 0, 0, X0, Y0. So it's coming all the way here. Well, if instead you wanted it to go, let's see, where am I at here? This, all right, this blank is 25 inches by 48. So let's say when it finishes here, I want it to come up here to, we'll say 28 inches. We're getting just far enough to get it out of the way a little bit. and then in the center, which would be 24. So we could just come down here to where that code is and say, okay, now I want you to go to X 24, Y 28. Okay, now you can see this little line. So now when it finishes this cut here, it raises the Z up, and instead of coming back here to the 0, it goes right here and gets it out of the way. So that will save you time from having to, you know, wait for it to get all the way back here before it stops, and then jog the machine back out here somewhere out of the way to get the clamps and stuff, you know, where you can unclamp it and pull it off and put another blank in and stuff like that. That's kind of what Patrick was talking about, although he was talking more about bits. But you can do the same thing where anytime you finish a program, let's say you've got this blank and you're not right out here at the edge of the machine, you've still, maybe your table comes on out here. If you run in, let's say we're using 2 different bits, like we mentioned, we're going to use a 1/2 inch bit to do that pocket. So we would put our 1/2 inch bit in. This pocket now would be a separate array. So instead of doing the whole part, it's going to do the pocket, and it would be the same thing. Only now, when it finishes the pocket right here, we could say, you know, now come up this way. And of course, if this is our 0, this is going to be in the negative Y. So I could come and change that to, and this is assuming we've got, okay, so let's just say I'm going to make this -5. Oops. There. Okay, so now you can see that when it, now assuming that, you know, I've got still the whole program, but if it was just doing the 1/2 inch bit, it would finish this last pocket, and then it would come right out here to the center of the front of the machine where you could get it. You could also say, one thing I didn't do, let me do it too, is this Z, it's only raised to 20 millimeters. We'll say I want to raise it way up. I'll add it to 2.787. And you're not going to be able to tell it because it's not showing here. But now when it gets to this point, the Z already raises up, and then it moves out here, but it's already up high enough that you can change the tool out real easy. So you would change that tool out to from the 1/2 inch that you're using for the pocket to the 1/4 inch that you're using for the holes and the profile cut. And then once you got it done, you'd load that other program in, hit cycle start, and it's going to go from here to your 0, because you haven't, as long as you don't re-reference anything, it still knows where 0 is over here, and it's going to do the same thing. And then maybe on that program, you might want it to, when it finishes, it moves up here out of the way, and then you can pull it off. So as long as you understand, that's kind of why I'm glad we did these shows talking about G-code a little bit, because basically this G00, that just means a rapid move. That means the machine's moving, but it's not cutting anything. It's just the Z's up in the air, hopefully high enough you're not hitting anything, any clamps or anything. And it's just, you're just telling it a spot to go to. So that's just a quick down and dirty how you can move it around. Next week or the week after, when we do another show, I'll try to show you how you can set that stuff up in Mach 3. The only thing, or not Mach 3, but Vectric and that kind of thing. The only thing is about when you set it up in there, you know, when you're using Vectric and you set something, the next time you load it in, it's going to have that. So if it's just something you want to do for that one job, I like changing the G code. That way I don't forget to change something back in Vectric, and the next thing you know, it's going somewhere, and you're like, "What the?" And you know,
Wayne would like to know if you have to reset Z0.
yeah, when you change the tool, you'll have to move it to a spot to re-zero it. Preferably where, you know, if you're doing something like that job that I just showed, hope, you know, preferably you're probably doing it on the table, or a spot on the outside part of the skeleton if you're going to use the top. But yeah, you definitely have to reset your 0 once you change the
Every bit change.
Reset the Z for sure. You don't want to reset the X and the Y, but you reset the Z for all the bit changes.
And Tim was asking if you've ever thought about building a multiple head machine.
No, there's no reason for me to. The thing about multiple head machines, if they're all on the same lead screw, you can program them so that they're running, but they're all running the same thing, and you can only run parts. You know, now you got to worry about the distance between those heads. So unless you got real complicated and put it on a separate lead screw and all that, and I have no reason to build anything like that. The last place I worked, we had a huge water jet machine, and it was a dual head, and it was the same kind of way. Of course, it was great for running little parts because it would, you know, both heads, you know, shooting that stream of water, but both heads would move, and then it would finish that part, and they'd both move up and do that. But so it doubles your production, but it also kind of limits you to some of the other things. But I don't have any reason to build anything like that.
Yeah, for a hobby level machine, there's no point. That's more for high production, for more of an industrial machine. You really don't need it for a hobby machine.
Yeah, and water jets are, I mean, they'll cut super thick stuff, but they are super slow.
Just buy 8 different routers and put 1 bit in each, and then just swap out the router each time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a quick change.
Yeah. The big thing is when you're doing those tool changes, make sure you reset the Z, but do not change the X or the Y. That way, the machine knows where it's at. Okay. Anything else? Didn't mean to keep you all this long. We always seem to run long.
Yep.
One guy had a drill on one head and a bit on the other. Yeah, I've never needed to use a drill on my router, because for one thing, it's spinning too fast. Those things aren't supposed to spin that fast. But I just peck drill with a regular end mill. All right, we're
challenges
over an hour and a half. Thanks again for y'all, and remember, no show next week. Oh, and one final thing I wanted to mention. I know we've already lost some viewers. They got bored on that last thing. I want to remind everybody about the Gatton CNC Christmas Challenge. That somebody had asked me about that a week or so ago. Maybe it was last week. If you're new and you didn't do it last year or the year before, this will be the 3rd one we've done. It's just a simple challenge to get people to get out in their shop, use their CNC, and even though it's called the Gatton CNC Christmas Challenge, that's just because it's my name. Not you can use any kind of CNC. You can even use a laser, whatever, 3D printer or whatever. But you have to make a Christmas themed project and submit you make a video, put it up on your YouTube channel, send me the link. We'll put together a playlist, and we'll have a lot of fun watching those after the first of the year.
Yep.
And probably have some prizes or something.
I've also got a challenge coming up. You mind if I plug that one, Dave?
You go right ahead, Mr. Javi.
Great. Take advantage of the November almost impossible challenge. Peter Posuelo last year, a fellow CNCer in our wonderful group, was the only one ever to achieve this. I tried myself. I'm trying again. 30 days, create a video a day, a project a day, or a piece of a project a day, but you got to video it, or it didn't happen. And a great project to do is try to do a Christmas themed thing. I mean, that's not one of the rules, but it would work very well with Dave's Christmas challenge, and you'll have a lot of show and tell for his upcoming challenge.
I was just thinking if they did the 30-day thing and
absolutely
at least a couple of days made a Christmas thing, they kill two birds with one stone.
A different little ornament a day, that's no big deal. Yeah. And it would.
If you guys, again, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
If you guys are unfamiliar or think, well, what can I make for this Christmas challenge? There's playlists for the 2016 and 2017 challenge, so you can go watch some of those other videos. Some people come up with some really cool ideas, and that maybe spark your imagination a little bit. But yeah, and like I said, you can do the 30-day challenge and make Christmas themed projects, and you'd be doing really good then.
Yeah, and David Jones, if I may plug him, in December also has, for those of you who have yet to buy a Gatton CNC but will be purchasing one, but just happen to have a bandsaw, David from Portal Woodwork has a bandsaw challenge that he's a big supporter of us here, of the community, and that's always go to Portal Woodworks for that.
Yeah, I actually did a bandsaw thing. My first ever, first ever and only bandsaw box. So
and you won one.
Ugly, but it was okay. But yeah, I try to support some of the other challenges if I can. But yeah, and again, the Gatton CNC Christmas Challenge officially starts Black Friday, November 23rd, and runs up through Christmas Eve, 11:59 p.m., right before Santa Claus comes. And as long as you have the link sent to me by then, you're entered. And I don't remember how many we had last year, about the same as the year before, but quite a few, I think.
Yep.
15, 20, something like that, I think. I can't remember.
Yeah, they ranged everywhere, from what I remember, they ranged everywhere from fancy, fully lighted yard displays to simple little ornaments on a 1/4-inch piece of wood, that a simple cut.
Yeah, just whatever you want to make, as long as it's Christmas theme, it'll fit right in. So, all right, well, we're going to get out of here. Thanks again, everybody, for watching. I appreciate you all coming in every Saturday night and hanging around with us and asking lots of good questions and stuff. I hope y'all are getting something out of these shows. If you are, that's great. And if you're not, let me know what you need to know. I don't know everything, but I'm happy to share what little bit of information I know. And if I don't know it, I'll get somebody on the show here that does know it, and we'll talk about it. So, anywho, thanks again, Javi. Thank you, Michael Murray. Thank you for coming on here tonight. And we're gonna have when you get ready, Mike. We're gonna have you on the show to show your Gatton build and talk about it and pitfalls to watch for and whatever you want to do. We'll have you on here to talk about that. So, all right, thanks everybody. Everybody have a great weekend. Like I said, no show next week. We'll be back November 3rd. Leave a comment. Let me know what you'd like to see us do, and we'll see y'all later. Everybody have a great weekend. Good night.
Have a good one.